By the generosity of the Community Foundation, thank you all for what you do and providing lunch for us. Thank you very much. You're great partners with the museums, and during COVID we all made adjustments, and some things are improvements that move on, and I think we stream this on Facebook Live, and so in addition to y'all here, there are people all over Mississippi and really the country watching this today on Facebook Live, so welcome to y'all too. On behalf of the board and staff at MDH, I'm Spence Flatguard. We welcome you to your museums. Mississippi has the most compelling history of any state in the country, really. And as I go through these museums, I see there are times in our history where leaders step up and bring us together, and then we move forward together. And I can't think of a better example of that in recent history than this flag vote. And the men on the stage exemplify that. And the vote that they took and the leadership. So I'm really excited about that and hearing about it in the next hour. So I'll give a brief introduction on these gentlemen, and I'll kind of incorporate. Each one of them could be a History is Lunch program. They have exceptional lives and families and beyond politics. And so I'll kind of go through each of them today. Speaker Gunn, he's the first Republican Speaker of the House of Representatives since Reconstruction. You may not know that his first elected position was school board, so his public schools are near and dear to his heart. And before that, he was the star quarterback in high school, and he played at Baylor. How about that? Top 10 schools. So he's an avid athlete. Briggs Hopson, senator from Vicksburg, and he also represents Issaquah and Yazoo counties. He's chairman of appropriations, so he's very popular this time of year at the Capitol. His phone's probably blowing up right now, but he is the lawyer for the local school boards. Public schools are important to him too. He announces the football games on Friday night at Vicksburg High, and his family you've heard of. His father passed away, Dr. Briggs Hopson, and his wife, Miss Pat, were the backbone of the Miss Mississippi pageant for decades in Vicksburg. 35 years they were the chairman and CEO, and his brother has made Mississippi history. He played football at Ole Miss, but then he's coached at Ole Miss, Alcorn State, Delta State, Southern, and now he's at Mississippi State, which I'm really happy about. So he's coached all over Mississippi and covered all the bases. Senator Derrick Simmons from Greenville, he's the Senate Minority Leader, and he's also a fascinating family. He graduated from Howard Law School, but his brother, Eric, his twin brother, is the mayor of Greenville. And this year, he's president of the MML, the Mississippi Municipal League. And so their mama's really proud. They've got another exceptional brother, too. So it's good to have you here with us, Derrick. And if he's not practicing law at the Capitol, he's on a tennis court. He's an avid tennis player. And Representative Robert Johnson on the end from Natchez, and he also represents Franklin and Jefferson County. He's the minority leader in the House, but he's got the unique distinction of he's served in both the Senate and the House. How about that? Exceptional family. His son, Robert IV, track athlete, and his dad ran track in college, so he gets it honestly. Star football player, played at Jackson State. And Senator Hopson, he teaches in Vicksburg High School and coaches football and golf. So he's something else. And then his daughters are exceptional. One just graduated from law school, and another one, Nona, you can see on Thursday nights on Law and Order, Organized Crime. So how about that? So look for that. I mean, this panel is something else. So I'll turn it over to Katie Blunt. I'm excited about this panel. She's our executive director here at the agency, and our agency staff, the Flag Commission. So she led that effort too. We were privileged to do that. Our chairman, Reuben Anderson, chaired the Flag Commission, and Betsy Hamilton from New Albany also served on the board. So it was a thrilling, busy time that I'm looking forward to hear about. And I really want y'all to linger afterwards and visit and go to your museums, go to the bookstore. We've got flags for sale and related items, and also on the website too. So please come back. And tomorrow night, the Nick Wallace is our chef here, and he's going to be on Top Chef, is that right, on Bravo. So a lot of exciting things happening. Please come back to your museums. Thank you, and I'll let you take it away, Katie.
Thank you, Spence, and I'm glad you mentioned the Flag Commission. We have a real live commissioner here, T.J. Taylor, and I'm sure a number of others watching on Facebook Live. With so many legislators in the room, I would be remiss if I did not thank the Mississippi Legislature for the strong support that you all give this agency, the two Mississippi museums, and all the work we do. Would our legislators who are not on the podium please stand? In many states, the State Historical Agency cannot say the same, so we are really grateful and proud to be in a state that cares so much about its history. And speaking of which, on June 28, 2020, the Mississippi Legislature made history. By a vote of 92 to 23 in the House and 37 to 14 in the Senate, the legislature passed House Bill 1796 and retired the flag that had flown over Mississippi since 1894. On July 1st, the flag at the state capitol was lowered and delivered here to the two Mississippi museums, where it is on exhibit in the History Museum. Over the next couple of months, commissioners appointed by the governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker worked in the public eye to choose a new design, the In God We Trust flag, to appear on the ballot. On November 3rd, Mississippi voters approved the new flag by a large margin, 72 to 28%, making headlines throughout the country and abroad. The new flag carried 80 of Mississippi's 82 counties. On January 6, 2021, the legislature designated the In God We Trust flag as the new state flag. On January 15th, in this room, Governor Tate Reeves signed the law, and the new flag was raised above the Capitol. To the media and outside observers, this change seemed sudden and unexpected. But inside the Capitol, efforts to change the flag had been underway for years. What changed in spring 2020 to propel this issue to the forefront? What changed the minds of people who had long opposed the new flag? Let's hear today from the people who made it happen. So if each of you would just talk briefly about your experiences that pivotal weekend, talk about your role and also your observations of how and why the momentum grew for a new flag. And I'll just leave it to y'all who starts. This will be a free-flowing conversation, and y'all can jump in as you wish.
Well, they know I'm the ham of the bunch, so I'll start. Just a little bit of background. So I see David Jordan here. We were serving in the Senate almost 25 years ago when we tried to force by lawsuit the lieutenant governor to allow us to vote on the flag. There was a mood in both houses that they didn't want to put that to a vote in either house, but we thought it was important, whether it passed or failed, that it was our responsibility and we should do something. So that's where it started for me as a legislator. And then the next milestone was when Speaker Gunn and Thad Cochran and Roger Wicker were the state leaders who said some 5 or 6 years before that the flag had to go. And I remember when I saw all the vitriol and all the messages that were being floated around, I remember calling Speaker Gunn and said, look, I know people know where you live, but I don't think they know where I live. They think I live in Adams County. So if you need somewhere to come and get away from those threats, you can come over here, 5 or 6 miles away from Clinton. And he said, well, I may have to take you up on that. But it was serious. It took a lot of courage and conviction to understand what time we lived in and why it was important for the state to go. And so it brings us to that summer that spring when I was designated by a group of freshman Republicans and younger Democrats who said, we need somebody to go to the speaker and say we need to take the flag down. And I remember going to the speaker and he said, well, you know what my position is, but there is no point in doing that because we don't have the votes to do it. They said, well, we know we don't. We're going to work some votes, and if you would do that and recommit yourself to it, we'll do all you need us to do to get that done. And he did. And neither one of us believed it could be done, but he went to work and we got that done. And that it was a milestone for me, not just about the flag, but also about a spirit of cooperation, and we began to work together on different issues, and this is one of the most important ones.
I guess I'll jump in and say Robert ended with that spirit of cooperation. And I just know at the beginning of this term, Democrats and Republicans worked together when we got that first $1.25 billion in coronavirus funds from the federal government. And I just think for me as a legislator who have served under 3 lieutenant governors, in 2020 under that third term that I was serving in, I would say it was the most invaluable that I felt as a member of the legislature, because we had an open door policy with the new lieutenant governor. And it wasn't any different when we came to this major issue. We had an open door policy with the lieutenant governor from the moment that we started considering changing the flag, and even the discussions throughout, and even when we got to the vote count, because we all knew that we needed to get a veto-proof measure. And so I would just say that spirit of cooperation is the very first thing that I would say I observed with Democrats and Republicans alike as legislators, as well as from the community. Because when I observe our religious community, black and white, our business community, our university athletes and coaches coming together to the Capitol saying, now was the time, that was one of the most proudest moments of my legislative career and what I observed in the process.
Well, since Representative Johnson talked about background first, I think that's a good place to start. And I look back to the vote that took place 20 years before, roughly 20 years before. And I remember I voted for, at that time, changing to the different flag. And I felt at the time, not because I did think about it from a historical perspective, and I did think, I heard arguments for and against the flag at that time, but I felt like in my heart that Mississippi could never really get to a place it needed to go without changing what was a symbol that too many people, both in the state and outside of the state, frankly detested or felt ashamed of. And I remember thinking that this will continue, if we don't do something back then, this will continue to be a problem for us later. And it seemed like over the next several years, every time there was a racial incident, a lot of people, for right or wrong, but a lot of people would point to the flag, and that was a point of contentiousness for Mississippi. And then fast forward a little bit to about 2015 or 16, I was asked, I was speaking somewhere and asked publicly about the flag, and I said, I just think, I voted to change it back then. I think we need to change the flag. But I also recognize something that Representative Johnson said, and I think the Speaker and Senator Simmons can also speak about this too, is you got to understand in the political realm that we're in, you can't do anything. You can talk about it until you're blue in the face, but you can't do anything until you have the votes to make a change. And the four of us, I know, recognize that. There are times when you have to strike, so to speak, and times to pull back. And I didn't feel like, and I think the three of them would agree with me, there was not a time in the legislature prior to 2020 that we felt like we could get something done. And I want to say something else about the time that I spoke publicly, came out several years before. I remember two things that stand out to me. One is during a campaign, one of my campaigns along the way, some people that I never thought would have said to me, we need to change our flag, said that to me. And I started thinking, there are other people out here that feel this way that I wouldn't have felt that way. The other thing I want to say is, you talked about the Speaker and the heat that he was taking. I certainly didn't take it because I'm a senator representing 3 districts, but the hate mail, the things that people sent to me after I said that publicly was just unbelievable. And I'm getting it from 3 counties and a few other people outside, but I understand the heat that you take for some of us on the Republican side when you come out and say it's time for a change of the flag. So I think I'm going to stop. That's kind of background. I know we'll talk more, or at least I hope we will, about some of the things that took place during those pivotal few weeks where we got the flag changed.
Well, going back to that particular episode, Katie, it kind of started 3 weeks before, right on the heels of the George Floyd incident. As Briggs said, anytime an incident occurs nationally, Mississippi seemed to be in the fair or unfair, right or wrong, our flag always seemed to come up. You had the Charlottesville, Virginia incident. You had Charleston, South Carolina. You had the George Floyd thing, and I could go on, but George Floyd happened about in May of that year. Mm-hmm. Excuse me, end of May. As y'all recall, that was the pandemic year. So we normally, in normal course of events, we wouldn't even be in session in June. But because of the pandemic and the suspension of business, we were now in session. And so we were not only dealing with this, we had a whole host of other issues going on. The budget and all the legislative bills were coming to an end or coming to a head. So it was June the 8th. It was Monday, June the 8th, and we convened. We convened or ended the session about 4 o'clock, and Robert says, I need to talk to you. I think he said, me and 2 others want to talk to you. I said, okay, come on. Had no idea what they wanted. Had no idea. So he and Shonda Yates and Chris Bell come to my office, and they said, Shonda charged out there first, said, we want to change the flag. And I kind of laughed because I said, well, so do I, but where are your votes? And Briggs makes an excellent point. Right or wrong, I know it's very frustrating for people who are not in the legislative process to understand this, but everything we do operates on votes. You can have the grandest, greatest idea in the world. If you don't have the votes, it's not going anywhere. I tell people all the time, we can't pass Mother's Day without the votes. Who's against Mother's Day? But if you don't have the votes, it's not going to happen. At that point in the session, and we operate by deadlines, as y'all may know, and the time for filing a bill had passed. So the only way to bring a bill forward is a 2/3 vote. On my end of the building, that's 81 votes. On your end, it's like 36, 35 votes. So I asked Robert, how many votes you got? And he said, well, we got all the Democrats. I said, and let me back up. On my end of the building, we have 122 members. So half of that is 61, a majority is 62. We had to have 62 votes to change the flag. But we had to have 81 votes to even open the door for a bill to be introduced. How many votes you got? Well, we got all the Democrats, which I think we counted to be 44. And we had 8 Republicans. That's 52. I said, we're not only are you 10 votes shy of changing the flag, you're 30 votes away from having enough to even bring the bill out. I said, that's just not going to happen. And like Robert said, they decided to, well, let's start the conversations and see. Then Briggs and I had a meeting one morning that week about other issues. We were talking about budgets and whatnot. We got up and we were walking out the door. We were in his office and we were walking the door. And Briggs says, what do y'all think about changing the flag? And that just kind of, it was another sign. I mean, my gosh, here's apparently interest on the Senate end for doing this. And so what happened over the next 3 weeks, and I can talk more about that, I don't want to take up all the time, but that's kind of what started the ball rolling. But it all really climaxed that last week between June 20th and June 27th, at least on my end of the building, is when the wheels really started moving and the ball started rolling. And the story in my judgment is very inspirational. It's very moving to tell some of the stories of the people, how they came to grips with the fact that they wanted to vote to change the flag. And I will say this, no one individual did it. This was a group effort, and every one of the men sitting up here played a vital role in that. I can tell you about conversations that Robert and I had about how do we strategize this, how do we work it on our end of the building. I know they were talking to Senator Simmons over here, and it took a team effort to bring it all together. But the last week is really, Katie, where it all began to come together, and that to me is the most inspirational part of the whole story.
Yes, and we want to hear more about that. Let's take a step back first and talk about Representative Johnson and Senator Simmons. The Legislative Black Caucus had worked for years, as you mentioned, Representative, to try to change the flag. Why had that issue been a focus, and when did you start to see this is different this year?
Well, the change was, I mean, what was important to us because, it's a constant narrative in Mississippi, but as African Americans, it's really a big deal. We don't like being last. We don't like going anywhere and people presuming we are who we are because we come from a state with a Confederate flag. it's just a non-starter. Derrick and I are both attorneys. We practice and we have to travel often to take depositions and go places. And some of them, sometimes and I'm sure these other two lawyers have the same experience, pretty complicated areas, high-profile people in the room. And I used to tell people, the first thing you got to do when you walk in a room and you tell people you're from Mississippi is make everybody understand you're not stupid. It sounds like a joke, but it's true. It's just like, I'm a lawyer, I'm here, I got to be here, I'm doing my job. But why don't you say something or do something to make us understand that you're not 100 years behind us on everything. And so that was important to our practice. It was important to our lifestyles. And we both have kids, and we want to create an environment that they'll want to come back to, that people that they know would want to come here and live. And the front door to your house, you got this big Confederate flag on it. It's saying don't come. That's what it was saying to me. And so I thought it was time to change. And as we talk about strategy and working up to it, Derrick and I, as being lawyers and also loving to hear ourselves talk, one of the biggest things we had to talk about and discuss with the speaker is like, do you think you all can manage not to give some speeches? I know it's a lot of pent-up frustration about the last 20 years not getting this done. And God knows I had a ton of stuff I want to talk about. I wanted to just get up to the podium and say a whole lot of things. We got 44 people who wanted to do that. But we knew that if that conversation started, even though we thought it was appropriate, that it would be something that wouldn't allow us to just work the process. We needed 80 votes. And there were people, just by the mere fact you got up and talked about what this flag represented and how bad it was and the relatives you had that suffered under it, there were people who would find that to be a reason to say, no, I don't want to be a part of any kind of change that's going to highlight that history. And so I think the speakers and the lieutenant governors and Briggs, for that matter, being a part of the Republican Party, the majority population, the biggest task we had was saying, look, I don't know if I can be quiet. And we worked that out and got it done because it was more important to win and have that happen than for us to have a day in the sun to say we had our say. But that was the biggest thing, keeping me and everybody else quiet. So we worked on it.
Katie, I'll add, as a young black policymaker, I would just say that the flag to me was a symbol of so many other underlying conditions that we experience as African Americans in the state of Mississippi. So we know about the disparities regarding education, healthcare, funding for infrastructure. So the black population in the state of Mississippi, as we try to fight for the population that we serve, they looked at the flag as just a symbol of so many other problems that exist in Mississippi. For me, I thought that was the starting point. I thought that if we could just get rid of the flag, which is a symbol that the whole world sees as divisive and oppressive, then we can start working together as Democrats and Republicans on all those other things to improve and move the state forward for all of its citizens. So that's the part about it. I would say I don't have the legislative experience as Robert. I certainly didn't serve in both chambers, but as a young black policymaker, I would say that part was important to me.
Thank you. We are honored to have Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann join us. Thank you so much. Governor Hosemann has a very tight schedule today, but I know he wanted to be a part of this. So, Governor, if you would just come up and take,
where you want me to go?
Right here, take as much time as you have to talk about your experiences at that pivotal point in the legislative session when the flag changed. How did it come about? What were your observations and what was your role? Is that enough?
I don't know, man. I can't remember all that stuff.
You say what you want.
Yeah, I just want to take a second. I'm very pleased to be next to the Speaker and Senator Simmons. Today, when we passed the teacher pay raise, I asked if there was anyone who wanted to co-sponsor. In the Senate, you can't co-sponsor House bills if teacher pay raise is a House bill. So Senator Simmons, we have a thumb, a white thumb that they bring up and they give to you if you mess something up. So he rose and he had his little thumb and I said, Senator Simmons, you're not recognized. The flag itself and the process that went through that was not really a 30-day, 10-day type process. It had grown from activities long before that. And when we started thinking about how to do this, the speaker really was a leader in that in those early years, speaking out, I think, the first time at the Neshoba County Fair, which is historically a very conservative place to be doing that. So when he started with that, the first conversations started about that. And when we all hired me to get, about a couple of years ago, and this was the first year that this had come up, we started the discussions. It was a COVID year. So we weren't meeting in normal process. So we were bouncing in and out depending on COVID, and we had to do a budget by the end of the year. So when that occurred, the flag gained more and more momentum. There were a number of different meetings with us and members of the House, members of the Senate, meetings with religious communities that the speaker had set up a couple of days before the vote, and very interesting, long discussions about people who had serious concerns one way or another. In about April, I guess this occurred in June, I'd say probably in May, I started going down to the Senate and writing an endorsement for changing the flag. And I kept it in my desk and I kept amending it, and sometimes some afternoons I'd work on it 2 or 3 hours about how this needed to be phrased. And it was important because it needed to be inclusive. We needed to make this decision. So I really wrestled with that statement that you saw later when it came out and whatnot. Then we went through the vote getting process, and the speaker and I were talking, I guess we're not supposed to say this, but how many votes you got and how many votes I got. No, you gonna go first or I'm gonna go first. And so we were going back and forth and talking and whatnot. And the whole process of this was just as Derrick was saying, as Senator was saying, was we needed to put this behind us. We have a lot of things to do in Mississippi. I just spoke this morning to FFA. I just read to the children this morning, the 2-year-old children and everything. They're the future of Mississippi. That future would not be as bright as it is today without changing that. And so all of our people got into this. It's time for the change. And I think its time was probably the most important process, to say that it just came about from a lot of times. I want to compliment the speaker on stepping out in front, but it came from a lot of processes. That is one after another after another. And the conversations, quite frankly, we didn't have the votes 48 hours before the vote. We didn't have them. When they talk about sometimes when we're actually taking the vote, I guess if it's on TV or anything, you'll see me start counting. And I knew if I went to the fourth hand, we got beat. So I would count, each little finger as we went along about people that were going to be no. And the reasons for that, they had run on that, so they felt like they had made a commitment to their people. It wasn't a negative thing, like they were for or against something. It's I told my people I would vote X way if this was asked of me. So they had to struggle with changing really within a year of their election. They had to struggle with changing their mind or changing what they had told people they would do. And there was a good bit of that, particularly towards the end. We were meeting at night, and I know Speaker was too. We were meeting at night with different sundry ones, and our Nathan Upchurch, our chief of staff, was meeting with some. We were calling. Leah's in the back here. She was calling me. We had all hands on deck to try to get the votes at the very end, and it was very close. I went into the cloakroom, and there were 2 people in there, one who had said he had to vote no because he had made this commitment. So I said, all right, we're going on the floor to vote. And I said, and you don't need to come. So I guess, I don't know, that's probably not legal. But he laughed, and later he voted for that flag when it came down to it. And so we, it was very touch and go. The feeling, I'm sure that the House had the same feeling, Senator, but after the vote, the feeling that we had done a monumental thing for the state. We just did a teacher pay raise today. We did the broadband bill today. Those are some critical things that we're working on and whatnot. But to feel that we had turned a corner, that we had opened a door, that we had allowed people to come through regardless of their race, color, creed, or national origin, and that this was a unanimous vote that united both Republicans and Democrats. As you well know, without the Republican votes, we wouldn't have had the change. So all of those people came together, and then at the end, the release and I've never really seen much like that. It's not like a football game when you win or something. It was almost like a religious experience in the Senate, and we had people who had argued against each other for years, hugging each other in the front of the place. And I think that has set the tone for the future. So what we did was not just change a piece of cloth, we changed an opportunity. So that's fine.
Thank you. Jerry Nash is working on, or has written an article that will be published soon in the Journal of Mississippi History about the flag transition. He talked to everybody here and many, many other people. He talked, Mr. Speaker, you talked in that article about some of the conversations you had in the closing days of the session with members who were reluctant to vote for a new flag and really struggling with the decision. Do you mind talking about that?
I will try. I don't know that we can underemphasize the role that vote counting makes here. As I said earlier, we had 44 Democrats, right, John?
Yeah,
Robert?
right.
So I assumed I had all those votes. I didn't bother to count those votes. Robert represented to me all the Democrats are in favor of here. So I had 44 votes. I had 8 Republicans. That gave me, what, 52? So as I said earlier, I was still 30 votes shy. The only place to get those votes on my end of the building is among the Republican caucus. So that's, to go back to what Robert was saying earlier, I said, Robert, I'm the only one that can go get those votes. I appreciate your willingness to help, but as a Democratic leader, you're not going to be able to go get Republican votes. So I've got to work that. And I just simply started having conversations. I didn't twist any arms. I didn't browbeat anybody. I just said, where you at? I need to know. I think we have an opportunity here to do something great. You know, where you at? And slowly, we began to get one, yeah, I'll be with you, I'll be with you. And I think we had built our number up to 15 or 16, but we were way short of 81 votes. The pivotal moment, 2 pivotal moments, I guess. And let me back up. I can't overlook what Briggs Hopson did in his office that day when he said, what do y'all think about changing the flag? As I said earlier, that kind of opened the door. This was the second thing. The first thing was Robert and those other 2 coming to see me. The second meaningful, monumental moment, I guess, was when Briggs Hopson said, what do y'all think about changing the flag? That started the conversation. But the next thing that probably occurred was Trey Lamar, who is a representative from Senatobia, chairman of Ways and Means. This was a 2 Thursdays before, 8 days before we made the vote. At that point, we were still way short of the votes. Trey Lamar put a Facebook post up saying, the time has come. And when he did that, that sent shockwaves throughout at least my end of the building. Members started talking, oh my gosh, are we about to change the flag? And it really started a conversation on my end of the building. We had a caucus meeting one day, talking about a variety of things, and at the end of the caucus meeting, one of my members who was not for the flag change raised their hand and said, "Are we about to change the flag?" And my former chief of staff, Nathan Wells, and I had conversations, and Nathan's the one who planted this seed in my head. I'm not smart enough to have come up with it on my own. But Nathan said to me, he said, "These people need to think about the history here. They need to think about their legacy. This flag's going to change." The momentum was too great. NASCAR had taken it down. The Marines had taken it down. The Southern Baptist Convention had voted to discontinue use. The NCAA was calling for it to be taken down. The SEC was calling for it. Just the momentum was too great. And so I made this response to this person who asked. I said, "Not right now because we don't have the votes, but I'll tell you, if we get the votes, we're going to vote to take it down." But I said, "You people need to go home and think about this." And this was the meeting before the weekend. This flag's going to change one day. And one day people are going to look back to this moment, and they're going to want to know, how did you vote? And I said, your children and your grandchildren and historians are going to look at what did you do when you had an opportunity to do something. I don't want my children and grandchildren to be embarrassed by Pop. If I cast a vote, my political career does not mean more to me than doing what's right. And for me, I don't want them to be embarrassed or have to explain how Pop voted the way he did because he made a campaign promise or because he just said, whatever. The vote sheet's just going to say no. It ain't going to say voted no because. It's just going to say no. And I don't want to be on the wrong side of history, and y'all need to go home and think about that. So on Saturday beforehand, the Saturday before the vote, 7 days out, Carl Oliver called Jason White. Jason White is my pro tem. Y'all may not remember Carl Oliver, but about 5 or 6 years ago, he made a mistake, went on to Facebook, and said anybody who moves monuments ought to be lynched. Y'all remember that? Carl regretted that. He apologized for that. That's not the kind of man he was. But this is the guy who made that statement. He calls Jason White on Saturday, June 20th. I'm in Monroe, Louisiana, watching my son play baseball. And Carl says to Jason, "How you going to vote?" Jason said, "I'm voting to change." Carl said, "I'll call you back." And he hung up. 30 minutes later, Carl calls him back. Jason said he was crying. And he said, "I've been talking to my wife and my daughters." And he said, "I'm not always going to be a legislator, but I will forever be a father and a grandfather." And he said, "I cannot have my children embarrassed about what I do here." He said, "Not only am I going to vote to suspend the rules, I'm voting to change the flag." And I'm going to tell you, that was the moment that I thought, we got a chance. We got a chance. And so the week began to unfold. I'll tell you, another pivotal moment is when our lieutenant governor came out and said he supported the legislature doing this as well. That was like a Tuesday or a Wednesday of that week. And Delbert Hosemann had the courage to step up and say, this is time for the legislature to act. That's another pivotal moment. Briggs was a pivotal moment. Delbert was a pivotal moment. As I said, no one person changed this flag. It was a team effort. Everybody had a role. Other stories, Manly Barton comes to mind. Manly Barton is the only Purple Heart recipient in the legislature. He was wounded in Vietnam, stepped on a mine, had shrapnel. He's still got shrapnel in his left shoulder to this day. Manly Barton, as you said, Katie, a minute ago, 80 of the 82 counties voted to change the flag. 2 of them did not. He represents one of those 2. So when Manly says, my people are not for this, he's telling the truth. I called him in my office. I said, Manly, I need your vote. He said, I can't do it. My people don't want this. They're going to beat me. I don't want to do it. I said, well, then I need your vote to help suspend the rules. Now, I don't know about these other guys, but for us, the biggest vote, the real vote, was on Saturday, June 27th, when we voted to suspend the rules. The next day, the flag changed. That was formality. The big vote was on Saturday for me, because we had to post 81 votes. So Manly says, I can't vote to suspend the rules. either. And I just kept asking him, so finally he capitulated. He said, okay, I'll vote to suspend the rules. But it's going to beat me. I'm telling you, it's going to beat me. And he left my office mad, and word back got back to me later that he told somebody I didn't love him anymore, and he was all upset. 5 hours later, we go to dinner together. He said, I need to talk to you before we eat. I said, okay. He said, I talked to my wife, and my wife asked me, are you going to be able to look at yourself in the mirror the day after this vote and be proud of what you've done? And he said, I know the answer. He said, I'm just scared. This is a Vietnam veteran, Purple Heart recipient. He said, I'm just scared. But he said, I know what the right thing to do is. He said, so not only am I going to vote to suspend the rules, he said, I'm going all the way, and I'm going to vote to change the flag.
Wow.
Steve Massengill, Hickory Flat, came into my office crying. He said, my 19-year-old son is begging me to change the flag. He said, I got to go with you. Joey Hood, Ackerman, Mississippi. I got called down to Trey Lamar's office. He said, Joey's in here. I go in and Joey's sitting in the corner crying. I said, what's the problem? He said, I got 2 little boys that are 9 and 10. They're watching their daddy. He said, I can't let them down. I got to do what's right. Brent Anderson from the coast, freshman, didn't want to do it. He said, I can't vote for it. It'll beat me. He represents Hancock County. Polling showed that Hancock County was one of the 3 counties in the state that was not going to change the flag. And he said, I can't do it. But he said, TJ Taylor, who y'all saw a minute ago, who helped design the flag, helped me more in my campaign than anybody. He said, I will help you suspend the rules, but I can't vote to change the flag. I said, that's fine, and that's all I need. Well, the day of the vote came. Not only did he vote to suspend the rules, not only did he vote to change the flag, he brought his wife and children up there to watch him punch the button. He wanted his children to remember the day that he punched the button and made history. Now, let me tell you, I'm not going to take up any more time. I could give you a dozen more stories like that. But 3 weeks out, I had 12 Republicans. The day of the vote, I had 48. 36 Republicans on my end of the building moved from the no column to the yes column. And people ask me what moved them. It wasn't the NCAA. It wasn't the SEC. It wasn't the Baptists or the Presbyterians. It wasn't the coaches coming to the Capitol. What moved them was their families, their wives and their children. The thought that they're about to make history, and my children are watching me, my grandchildren are watching me. History's going to record what I do. And they struggled with political protection and doing what was right. And I had 36 Republicans move from the no column to the yes column. And I will tell you, I believe the Lord did that first of all. No human being could cause that kind of movement within a week's time. I can move 5 or 6 votes, but I can't move 36 in the midst of everything else that we were doing. I think the Lord worked in the hearts of those people. They wanted to do what was right. And on Friday, I recounted my votes. I had them. Saturday morning, I go to Briggs Hopson's office. And I said, we got the votes. I need to know if you got the votes. And as soon as you tell me you got the votes, we're going to move on it on our end of the building. And Briggs and Josh Harkins were in that meeting, and the 2 of them started working the floor on their end of the building. And the 2 of them went, and I said, I want y'all to look every Republican in the eye and ask them where they're at. And they did. And 3 hours later, he calls me and he says, we got the votes. I said, we're moving. So I called a recess, convened my caucus, told them what we were about to do. And the last question I got was, are we going to have a lunch break? And I said, no, absolutely not. We are not going to lunch. That tells you where the priorities of legislators are. And we brought it up. We had the vote, sent it to the end of the building, Lieutenant Governor and Briggs. Now I'm going to tell you about this man right here. His daddy died that day, or the day before, I guess it was.
Eulogized the day before.
Yeah, buried the day before. So he was in other places. His mind was in other places. But he steps up. His daddy had been buried. He's back at the Capitol for the first day after the funeral, and then he gets hit in the face with, hey, this is coming to the floor in 30 minutes. You got to be ready. So Briggs Hopson steps up. He gets a speech together. He goes to the floor. He presents it. The story's a lot more tenuous on that side of the bill. I got the votes by 3. We had 84 votes. Needed 81. We got 84. They needed 35. I think you had 36, didn't you?
Needed 36, 37.
Yeah,
37.
then we
Had
got
one,
37.
one to spare. So their job was very difficult as well. So that's kind of, those are just some anecdotes. Katie, I could tell a dozen more like that because there's 36 stories like that. But those are some of the ones that
And
I follow.
I've got to go
most
give a
meetings.
speech, and I thank you, Speaker, that was very moving. I know it's personal for you, and so I will tell you this real quick thing. There are some things that happened after the vote, and TJ and I appointed my members, Sherry Beavis and Mac Varner, and so they started knocking on doors. We weren't there yet. We had to go. Everybody got the ability to vote. So Mac Varner was a good friend of mine for years and grew up in Vicksburg and was a big Civil War buff, so I thought that would be helpful and everything. So he goes all over, knocking on doors, raising money, getting ready for the flag vote. So it was driving his wife crazy. So I called over there, I said, can I speak to Mac? And she said, you mean flag breath. So not only did all of this go on, but after that, TJ and the rest of them, under your very competent leadership, had to go get the votes, which you ended up doing, what was it, 70s? What was it, vote?
It was 72 to 28.
Yeah, 72% of the vote, which I'm just speaking for myself. I've never got that much, so whatever. But anyway, it was a really significant thing. And once that ball got rolling, we had similar calls like the Speaker did, and we had kids calling from Washington to a certain senator, I'm not going to mention names, that was reluctant to vote. And a lot of that stuff went on. But in the end, that historical part is only good for what we do with it. You know, we took that step. Now we need to run. And I think certainly in the House and the Senate side, and I'm sure the governor too, we are ready to run. So I'm going to go speak
Thank
to
you
the
so
Jackson who says they're out of money. I don't know how they got it.
Thank you, Governor.
Philip. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Before we close, I would love to hear from Senator Hopson. As the Speaker said, it was an incredibly emotional, difficult time for you. Talk about those few days in your life.
Well, I'm going to go back to the meeting. I'll speak quickly because I think we only have about 5 minutes. But when the Speaker and I met, I think it was he and Jason White, his pro tem, and my budget analyst, Senate budget analyst, and I were in the office when we brought it up the first time. And what you said, you know, we kind of stopped when we brought it up and we talked about it. And we both kind of said, do we think we got a chance of doing this? And, you know, we both got realistic for a minute and go, probably not going to happen, but let's give it a stab and see what happens. So he went and started the process, obviously, and met with Robert. Well, I took off. I don't know what day this was. I think this was before my father had passed away. But I took off, and you kind of know in your chamber who's not going to support something and who is. And I talked to my desk mate, David Blunt, of course, happens to be married to the beautiful lady on the other end of this podium, or the other end of this table. But I knew from my kind of quiet discussions with David that certainly all the Democrats were going to vote for this, and we had to get enough Republicans. And I think our Democratic-Republican breakdown in the Senate is 35-17 or 36-16. Thank you, Derrick. So I kind of did I took the people out of the factor that I knew would not vote for a flag change because they had been very vocal about not ever voting for a flag change. And I started thinking about all the other members, and I kind of went around independently and just picked them one at a time over the course of 2 or 3 days. And I had 4 votes out of the Republicans to be able to make the flag vote change. And I thought realistically this is probably not going to happen. Well, go forward a few days, and we met in your office. We were talking about CARES Act, I think, or budget or something. And you brought it up at that point. You said, "How you doing on the flag vote?" And I think I said, "Not real good on my end. How are you doing?" He said, "Not great either, but let's keep plugging along." So we did. And then, of course, my father did pass away about 5 or 6 days before the flag vote, and I was trying to work as much as I could. Keep in mind, we had to get the budget done by the end of the year. I think we were still in some CARES Act distributions. Plus, we had all the other general bills. We were here at the end of June in an extended session that was going to be ending at the end of the month. And frankly, the Lieutenant Governor's staff and a few others really worked hard down the stretch to kind of start picking up. I was talking to a few when I could, but they were kind of picking apart, one by one, picking on people, kind of doing the same thing the speaker did. And we had a few emotional stories too. But I tell you, when I felt the most elated was right before the day. My father was buried on a Friday, and right before I left on Thursday, one of the guys that I thought there was no way, he had already told me, "I can't vote for it." Same kind of story. "I will get defeated. My folks don't want it." And he came up to me privately and said, "You can't tell anyone, but I'm voting to change the flag." And I kind of left with a good feeling that night, went home. I missed that Friday because of my father's funeral. I think that was the day that I was out, and then came back Saturday morning. I thought that's when we talked about it. It was Saturday morning, not Friday morning.
That's correct.
And it was Saturday morning. He said, "We've got the votes." And I said, "Uh-oh." we better make sure we've got the votes to go forward with this. But anyway, we did get the votes. We thought we had the votes. But I remember, too, just things that stand out to me were going to the floor that day and the people that said prayers right before I went up there to do this. And I was still kind of emotionally raw from the day before, but went up to the floor, and it all worked out well. It worked out, and there were some really special moments. It would take me too long to get into those really special moments that I'll never forget about people, things people said and things people did. And good news is it worked out. It was a wild journey, and a lot of things I could tell you. I wish I had 3 hours to sit up here and talk to you about some of the good stories, but we're just thankful that it worked out, and we've got this beautiful flag behind us leading us forward in Mississippi.
The next day was the 28th, and we voted to change the flag. And that night, we all went out to celebrate. Briggs, Josh, me, Jason, Trey, those of us who were working it. And every one of us got COVID except for Briggs. So.
Hey, Katie, let me just say this too. I know Senator Hillman Frazier did not miss one single meeting when the commission met here. And one of the most things I remember is when he gave his speech on the floor, and I'll never forget, but he told the chamber to pray first, aim high, and stay focused. And so the very next session, I know Briggs, he remembers, Senator Frazier gave every single person on the Senate side, including the staff, a little portrait that had those words on it. And so to me, it symbolized the moment that we were going through when Senator Frazier said on the floor that we could get this done and move together as a state. But what we have to do is pray first, aim high, and stay focused. Thank you, Senator Frazier.
Katie, we had some other legislators that have come in too. I see Tracy Rosebud back there. Senator Jordan's over here. Mm-hmm. I saw Carl Mickens and Jeffrey Harness. There's Senator Butler. I didn't want to overlook those. I noticed they had come in since we introduced them. So these guys were all instrumental casting the vote as well. Yep. So I want to bring attention to them.
Thank you. This is an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing it with us, and thank you all and those of you legislators in the audience for making it happen. Real quick, I hope you'll all join us next Wednesday at noon when Attorney General Lynn Fitch and Mississippi Bar President Jennifer Ingram Johnson will discuss the life and career of Evelyn Gandy. And then we'll return to the flag on April 20th at noon when Jerry Nash will discuss his upcoming article in the Journal of Mississippi History. And don't forget, as Spence mentioned, we have flags and flag-themed items in the store. Thank you all so much, and thank you all.
Thank you, Katie.
I can't tell those stories right. Got the front row seat.